So we already covered the brand new races, or the updated official Eberron races, in one video previously. This one's going to talk about the additions or adjustments to the other main races in Eberron, as well as all of the Dragonmark races. So if you want to see how those compare in the new published source versus Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, stay tuned. All right, so here we are on D&D Beyond. The left side is Eberron Rising from the Last War. The right side is Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron. So talking about the other races, I guess I could preface that by saying the original guide we had from Wayfinders had, right, Changeling, Kalistar, Shifters, Warforged. Those are the kind of new races, the ones we've already discussed in a previous video. Then you have things like Dwarves, Elves, Gnomes, Half-Elves, Half-Orcs, Halflings, Humans, and other races. I looked through the dwarves. There's really no difference between both. They have a couple things about like past, like quirky style things, right? This was a D6. This is now a D8. But however, the elves did actually have something in Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron. They had 2 new variant races, which I thought were really cool, and a new feat to cover a new type of weapon called the double-bladed scimitar. That is here, but it's changed. So let's compare. So here you see elf variants. It says in Ariani, I guess that's how you pronounce Areni. Elf can choose 1 skill or tool proficiency. Your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability checks that you use this proficiency. So basically, this replaced the elf weapon training. So there was 2 different versions, right? There was high elf and wood elf. This would replace elf weapon training, and instead you'd get the skill or tool and then expertise in that. Or if you chose Valinar, again, options being wood and elf, you gain proficiency with scimitar, double scimitar, longbow, and shortbow. So that was pretty cool. They removed those variants. There's clearly nothing here referencing that at all. If we scroll down, we show they do showcase the double scimitar here. Which it looks like it's pretty much the same here as far as it goes. It states they're about 100 gold. They are 2d4 slashing damage, and it states basically right here, a double scimitar is a martial weapon weighing 6 pounds, dealing 2d4 slashing damage on a hit. It has 2-handed property and the following special property. If you attack with a double-bladed scimitar as part of the attack action on your turn, you can use a bonus action immediately after to make another melee attack. This attack does a d4 damage on a hit instead of 2d4. And here it basically says the same thing. When you take the attack action and make a 2-handed attack, you can make a bonus action. The attack uses the same attack modifier as the primary attack. The weapon's damage die is a d4 and it deals slashing damage as opposed to the initial 2d4. So that is basically the same. It's just worded slightly different. And then there was a feat they added here called the Revenant Blade. Prerequisite was Elf. Increase your dex or strength score by 1 to a maximum of 20. While wielding a double-bladed scimitar with 2 hands, the weapon has the finesse trait for you, and you gain a +1 to AC. And then they said on your turn, when you make the bonus action attack, making the melee attack, it does 2d4 instead of 1d4, basically meaning the bonus action attack was the same as the base attack. The new official published Revenant Blade has a lot of the same. Still get the dex strength or dex score increased by 1. While holding a double scimitar with 2 hands, you still get the +1 bonus to AC. And then lastly, it has the finesse property when you wield it. So they removed this whole letting it do the full damage on the bonus action attack. Then if we scroll down, basically that is about it. We have our gnomes here. We have our Zil schemes, looks to be about the same. Half-orcs are referenced. They do have, I don't know if goblinoids were listed here. They had a couple of different dinosaurs listed here under Talenta Halflings. This looks like this is the Clawfoot Raptor. The tooltip's not found because they did update that. I think it does have, okay, it did have goblinoids here because the goblins are published. It just was kind of listed under other races. Because the goblins are in it from a different book, they do actually provide the stats for Bugbear, Goblin, and Hobgoblin. They are exactly the same as they are in Volos. We do have half-elves here, halflings again with the quirks, humans, stuff about Dragonmarks, Kalashtar, orcs and half-orcs. We already talked about the orc, shifter, And then I think finally is Tieflings, a little bit on Tieflings, nothing different here. And then Warforged. So really, the only major difference in the pre-existing races is they removed the 2 new elf variants, the Valinar and the Areni elves, and they tweaked the Feat Revenant Blade. It does still exist, but it is different, and technically now a double scimitar is an officially published weapon. So something else that they added was, or they had in the original, was the idea of Dragonmarks, which is an Eberron concept. So we're going to take a look at how the Dragonmarks changed here. So they are sort of based around different houses, and you can see here, right, humans and half-orcs, a Dragonmark is a variant race that replaces normal traits. For half-elves, it's a variant race. For dwarves, elves, gnomes, and halfling, it replaces your sub-race. That is the same, basically, as it lists here. So we'll scroll down, and we can see we have detection, finding, handling, healing, hospitality, making, passage, scribing, sentinel, shadow, storm, and warding. They are all still the same, and from what I can tell at a quick glance here, they are also still the same. The only difference is the mark of finding is now available for humans and half-orcs. Previously, it was just half-orcs. Otherwise, it all looks to be the same. So I'm not going to go too much into the history of what a Dragonmark is. They do have a section here on quirks. It was 6 quirks. Now here it's 8. They show you some of the different markings. And then, you know, the house agent background is here. That we'll touch on that, I guess, as well. But let's roll into the different marks. So we have mark of detection up front. Okay, so this is for a half-elf. And it says here was originally your intelligence and charisma scores both increase by 1. In addition, one ability score of your choice increases by 1. Here it is now your wisdom score increases by 1 and an ability score of your choice increases by 1. So completely different. Originally it was investigation, and when you make an investigation or insight check, you will add a d4 to that. They called it this whole intuition die, which they kind of went away from that. It is still investigation and wisdom, and it's just you add a d4 to those rolls. It had sense threats originally. You'll see there's a really cool concept, and I'll get into that in a second. Sense threats. You can cast detect magic and detect poison and disease spell, but only as rituals. Intelligence is your spellcasting modifier for this. It is now detect magic and detect poison and disease. Starting at 3rd level, you can also cast see invisibility. You can cast these once per long rest without expending a spell slot, and you don't require the material components. They did add something like this for every single one, which I thought was really cool, called Spells of the Mark. So if you have spellcasting or pact magic, the spells on the Mark of Detection spells table are added to your spell list. So regardless of what class you are playing, if you are a Mark of Detection half-elf, the following spells are added to your spell list: detect evil and good, detect poison and disease, detect thoughts, find traps, clairvoyance, non-detection, arcane eye, divination, and legend lore. So this concept of the spells of the mark is amazing. It expands depending on what what race you are. You could add, depending on some of these options, some seriously unattainable spells for that class, and just immensely expanding this out. I mean, obviously it only goes up to 5th level, so for certain like half casting classes like a ranger and a paladin, for example, or if you are a 3rd caster like an arcane trickster or an eldritch knight, you're not going to probably get benefits of all of the spells from all of the levels, which is unfortunate, but it may give you access to some spells you wouldn't normally have. And I do think that this really, really shines on any class that has prepared spellcasting, something like a cleric, a druid, a paladin, a wizard, ones where you can, when you rest for the night, you choose which spells you're going to prepare, because this is just going to give you all of these added to your spell list. If it's a spells known, that's still good. That gives you the options to choose these spells going forward, but it's less powerful in that aspect. So next up is the Mark of Finding here, which is a half-orc or human. Originally here, it was just half-orc. It was originally Strength and Wisdom by 1 and Ability Score of your choice by 1. It is now Wisdom by 2 and Con by 1. So you see that's significantly changed. It also granted, it was Hunter's Intuition, Perception and survival checks get the D4. That is still the same. You now also get dark vision out to a range of 60 feet, which is good. I mean, it's the same for a base half orc, but for a human, you're now a human with dark vision. It had imprint prey. As a bonus action, choose a creature within 30 feet. The target is imprinted in your mind. Alternatively, you can use this whenever you make a wisdom. Alternatively, you can imprint a creature as your quarry when you make a survival check. When you're tracking your quarry, double the result of your intuition die, which is that D4. When your quarry is within 60 feet, you have a general sense of its location. Attacks against it ignore half cover. If you can't see the target when you attack it, your inability to see it doesn't impose disadvantage on the attack roll. So this is really just wordy and long, and they cut that entirely and replaced it with, you can cast Hunter's Mark once without expending a spell slot, and then at 3rd level you can cast Locate Object. Again, Wisdom's the modifier for this, once per long rest on each of these. Because it replaces, it's a brand new race, so it gives you Speak, Read, and Write, Common, and Goblin. And then, as we discussed previously, you will get spells of the mark, which are Fairy Fire, Long Strider, Locate Animals or Plants, Locate Object, Clairvoyance, Speak with Plants, Divination, Locate Creature, and Commune with Nature. Fairy Fire is a great option depending on what you are. There's a couple ones that are in here as rituals. They're added to your spell list, so if you're a class that can ritual cast, and these are now rituals that you have access to, that's pretty useful for you. And then originally, they also had at 3rd level, you can cast Locate Animal and Plants, but only as a ritual. Now it's an option for you here as well. All right, Mark of Handling is next, which was a human mark. It was Dexterity and Wisdom by 1, and ability score of your choice by 1. It is now, once again, Wisdom by 2, and ability score of your choice by 1. In Animal Handling and Nature, got the Intuition die. It's now the same, Animal Handling and Nature. It was, you could use your help action to aid an ally or animal companion, to aid, not an ally, to aid an ally animal companion within 30 feet rather than 5 feet. And you can cast Animal Friendship once with this trait and regain the ability to do so when you finish a short or long rest. And when you cast a spell that affects only beasts, it also affects monstrosities with an intelligence score of 3 or lower. You now have Animal Friendship and Speak with Animals once per long rest without expending, once per short or long rest without expending a spell slot. So that's beneficial here. It's the same here as Animal Friendship, except you have that plus Speak with Animals. Starting at 3rd level, you can target a beast or monstrosity when you cast Animal Friendship or Speak with Animals, provided their intelligence score is 3 or lower. So you still have that. They lost the help action piece, but you get the following spells for spells of the mark: Animal Friendship, Speak with Animals, Beast Sense, Calm Emotion, Beacon of Hope, Conjure Animals, Aura of Life, Dominate Beast, and Awaken. Pretty good options here. Mark of the Healing Halfling is really good. It could turn basically any halfling, regardless of what their class is, into a healer. It's more beneficial if you're a class that has spellcasting, so you're not just doing it one-off. But remember, this is going to replace your sub-race, so still Wisdom applied 1 for both. It was when you make a medicine check, you can add a D4. Now it's when you make a medicine check or a check using an herbalism kit, add a D4. Here it was as an action, you can spend 1 of your hit dice to revitalize a creature you touch. Roll the die, add your Wisdom modifier, and the creature regains a number of hit points equal to that, once per short or long rest. And then you had Spare the Dying with Charisma as the modifier, which didn't make a lot of sense given you got a +1 Wisdom. But now you can cast Cure Wounds with this trait. At 3rd level, you can also cast Lesser Restoration. These are once per long rest. And then Wisdom is your spellcasting modifier. And then you have spells of the mark are Cure Wounds, Healing Word, Lesser Restoration, Prayer of Healing, Aura of Vitality, Mass Healing Word, Aura of Purity, Aura of Life, and Greater Restoration. Those are all really good healing spells that have just been added to your list, ideally. Mark of Hospitality is again another halfling one. Charisma by 1 originally. You had Friends and Prestidigitation cantrips with Charisma as the modifier. And then when you made Persuasion checks or an ability check involving brewers, supplies, or cook's utensils, you added a D4. The Persuasion and brewers or cooking supplies is still the same. You now know the Prestidigitation cantrip only, but you can also cast Purify Food and Drink and Unseen Servant once per long rest without expending a spell slot, still using Charisma. And your spells of the mark are Goodberry, Sleep, Aid, Calm Emotions, Create Food and Water, Leomund's Tiny Hut, Aura of Purity, Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum, and Hollow. Which, again, some healing spells, some Leomund's Tiny Hut. Again, if you have ritual casting, that's now a ritual spell for you. Mark of the Making was a human one. It was originally Intelligence and Dex by 1, and then either increased Intelligence or Dex by an additional 1 point. It is now Dex or Intelligence by 2 and an ability score of your choice by 1. Artisan's Intuition was an ability check with Artisan's Tools, adds a d4. It's now Arcana check or Artisan's Tools, adds the d4. You had the Mending cantrip. You could choose a cantrip from the wizard spell list to describe the item connected to it, as long as you possess the item. So basically, you have Mending plus another wizard cantrip at the end of a long rest that you could swap, and you could spend 1 minute to weave a temporary enchantment into a non-magical suit of armor or weapon. For the next hour, the object becomes a magic item, getting a +1 bonus to AC if it's armor, +1 bonus to hit and damage if it's a weapon, once per long rest. You now, instead of some of that stuff, you're getting proficiency with one artisan's tool of your choice. You still know the Mending cantrip, and rather than Spellsmith, they made it the Magic Weapon spell. You can cast the spell Magic Weapon with this trait. When you do so, it lasts for an hour and doesn't require concentration. You need to finish a long rest to get it back. Intelligence is the spellcasting modifier for it. And the following spells of the mark: Identify, Tensor's Floating Disc, Continual Flame, Magic Weapon, Conjure Barrage, Elemental Weapon, Fabricate, Stone Shape, and Creation. It clearly has a lot of crossover with the Artificers, so you could potentially use this class to get a lot of these spells just automatically known. Mark of the Passage is another human one. Dex by 2, ability score of your choice by 1. That remains. Here it was your base walking speed becomes 40. Now it becomes 35. It was originally athletics check or check to maintain a land vehicle, adds a d4. It's now acrobatics check or land vehicle. When you use the dash action, difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement originally. Now you get Misty Step once per long rest with dexterity as the spellcasting ability. And then it had Shared Passage. As a bonus action, you can teleport a distance up to your walking speed, ending in an unoccupied space. You can bring a creature with you. It must be within 5 feet of you to use it. Now that's been replaced with just Misty Step once per long rest, and the following spells of the mark: Expeditious Retreat, Jump, Misty Step, Path Without Trace, Blink, Phantom Steed, Dimension Door, Freedom of Movement, and Teleportation Circle. This is a really good set if you're playing a human character, because depending on what you pick, if you're a cleric or a paladin or a druid, you just added Misty Step and Pass Without Trace, as an options for you. Phantom Steed's a great ritual spell. Dimension Door is always useful, and Teleportation Circle. This is a way to get a lot of these spells potentially on classes that don't normally have access to this kind of movement. Mark of the Scribing is exclusively for gnomes. Charisma by 1 remains. It was originally proficiency with calligrapher supplies and forgery kits, adding a d4. It is now history or calligrapher supplies at the d4. You could cast Comprehend Languages once per long rest originally, Message with Intelligence as your ability modifier, and an extra language. You now know Message. It's all kind of combined. Message cantrip. Comprehend Languages once, regain the ability after a long rest, and then at 3rd level, Magic Mouth once for long rest. And then the following spells of the mark: Comprehend Languages, Illusory Script, Animal Messenger, Silence, Sending, Tongues, Arcane Eye, Confusion, and Dream. A lot of good long-distance conversation kind of spells, so that's pretty good. I kind of like the extra language it originally got, but having Comprehend Languages, again, if you have ritual casting, a lot of these are ritual spells, so you can kind of get around it that way. Mark of the Sentinel is for humans. Originally, it was Strength and Wisdom +1 and ability score of your choice by 1. It is now Con by 2, Wisdom by 1. It was when you make an initiative roll or perception check, add a d4. It is now Insight or Perception and add the d4. You knew the cantrip Blade Ward and can cast Shield with this trait once per short or long rest. You now know Shield and can cast that once per long rest. And then Vigilant Guardian was as an action, designate an ally you can see as your ward. You have advantage on Insight and Perception checks made to spot threats against them. In addition, while you're within 5 feet of your ward and that creature is a target of an attack, you can use your reaction to have it swap places with them. When you do so, you become the target of the attack. They basically took out that first piece about perception and insight and just kept the last part of Vigilant Guardian. You could basically swap places, and you get the following spells of the mark: Compelled Duel, Shield of Faith, Warding Bond, Zone of Truth, Counterspell, Protection from Energy, Death Ward, Guardian of Faith, and Bigby's Hand. This is really good. It's Constitution +2 and Wisdom +1. An extra die on a perception check is great. A once a day shield spell is always useful. But what I really like is it's adding potentially to a class that may not have it, Bigby's Hand and Counterspell. Counterspell is a huge spell that like a lot of classes potentially don't get, like say Bard or Druid or Cleric, and this might be a way for you to get around that and add that in. Mark of the Shadow is for elves only. This is a new subrace, Charisma by 1 for both. You gain proficiency with performance, skill, and then add a d4 to performance and stealth checks. The d4 to performance and stealth checks remains. It used to get minor illusion as a cantrip with charisma as a modifier. You now still get minor illusion as a cantrip, but you can cast invisibility once without expending a spell slot at 3rd level. And then slip into the shadow was an option you had where you can hide as a bonus action even if you have no cover. Regardless of whether you succeed or fail, once you use this ability, you can't finish a short or long rest. That has been cut, as was the proficiency with performance or 1 musical instrument. So you have Cunning Intuition, now you have Minor Illusion and a free invisibility, and the following spells of the mark: Disguise Self, Silent Image, Darkness, Pass Without Trace, Clairvoyance, Major Image, Greater Invisibility, Hallucinatory Terrain, and Mislead. Again, another set of really great spells to get on any class that doesn't have them. Pass Without Trace is always a useful spell to have, so if you can get that on a class that doesn't normally get it, everyone's going to thank you for it. Mark of the Storm is exclusively for half-elves, which was Dex and Charisma +1 and another ability score of your choice by 1, is now Charisma by 2 and Dex by 1. You had a swim speed of 30 feet. They removed that. You had the D4 on acrobatics checks or checks operating water or air vehicles. It is now acrobatics checks and navigator's tools. Both of them grant you just flat out resistance to lightning damage, which is pretty nice to just get. Again, you're a half elf. You usually get a lot of good stuff for being a half elf, but now you're getting a resistance to a damage type on top of all this other stuff. You originally got the Gust cantrip and at 3rd level the Gust of Wind spell once per long rest. That remains the same. And then you used to speak, read, and write Common and Elvish as that. It doesn't state that... the following abilities replace the half-elf ability score increase and skill versatility traits in the Player's Handbook. So that's going to be the extra 2 skills and the ability score improvement. So you're going to get all that, but that means you're still going to get Fey Ancestry, which is magic can't put you to sleep, and advantage on saving throws versus Charmed. You're still going to get Dark Vision of 60 feet, and you're still going to get Common, Elvish, and an additional language. So this is pretty powerful overall, I would say. So I would definitely recommend this if you're going to go a charisma-based class. And then again, on top of everything we just talked about that you're getting, you're also going to get the following Mark of the Storm spells: Featherfall, Fog Cloud, Gust of Wind, Levitate, Sleet Storm, Wind Wall, Conjure Minor Elementals, Control Water, and Conjure Elemental. So all of that cool stuff plus extra free spells. I think lastly here's Mark of the Warding, exclusively for dwarves. It was the subrace that was going to give you, so it was Con, and it was going to be +2 Constitution and then a +1 Dex and +1 Intelligence. They made that just +1 Intelligence. And it was History, Investigation, and Thieves Tools for unlocking things or traps at a D4. It is now just Investigation or Thieves Tools at the D4. You used to get Alarm as a ritual and Arcane Lock at 3rd level. You now get Alarm and Mage Armor, and then at 3rd level you get Arcane Lock. And these spells are all once per long rest, do not require the material components for you to cast them. And then you'll get the Mark of the Warding spells, which is Alarm, Armor of Agathis, Arcane Lock, Knock, Glyph of Warding, Magic Circle, Leomin's Secret Chest, Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound, and Anti-Life Shell. So that was a significant bump up for the Dwarf one as well. I guess while we're here, we'll talk about Aberrant Dragonmarks, which was a feat. Originally, it had to be at least 8th level, and you had... Oh, this was the Greater Dragonmark. It looks like they did not add a feat for Greater Dragonmarks, I don't believe. Nope, no feat for Greater Dragonmarks. But the Greater Dragonmark feats were the ones that granted you extra spells, so they removed that in favor of spells of the mark. Now, the Aberrant Dragonmark was a feat. Let's see how much of that changed. It originally gave you Constitution, went up by 1 to a max of 20. A cantrip from the Sorcerer's spell list. In addition, choose a first level spell from the Sorcerer's spell list. You can cast this spell at its lowest level once per long rest. Constitution is the ability for that. And you can increase the power of your aberrant spells at the risk of your own vitality. When you cast a spell with your aberrant mark, you can use one of your hit die to increase the effective spell level by 1. Immediately after you cast the spell, roll the hit die. You take damage equal to it. I believe it's pretty much the same. You get a +1 Constitution, cantrip of your choice from the Sorcerer's spell list. What first level spell? You learn that spell. Does it say that? You learn that spell and can cast it through your mark. Once you cast it, you can't do it. See, now here it was long rest. Here it is now short or long rest before you can cast it again through the mark. So that is a nice benefit. Constitution is the ability. And when you cast a spell through your mark, you can expend a hit die. If you roll an even number, you gain temporary hit points equal to the number rolled. If you roll an odd number, one random creature within 30 feet of you, not including you, takes force damage equal to the number rolled. If no other creatures are in range, you take the damage. You also develop a random flaw from the table, which is from here. And they do provide you an option for greater aberrant powers where you could get a 10% chance to basically get an epic boon from the Dungeon Master's Guide. But if you get it, you permanently lose a hit die, and your hit point maximum is reduced by a hit die roll plus your Constitution modifier, and it can't be reversed in any means. I think we did see we had the House Agent background here, so while we're here, we'll just look at that as well. I think that's up to the top here. Yeah, so it was Investigation and Persuasion. That remains the same. 2 tool proficiencies from the House Tool Proficiency table. 2 tools by house. Looks like those tool sets, from a quick glance, look to be the same. And then your equipment was a set of fine clothes, house signet ring, ID papers, and a purse containing 20 gold. That's the same. And then you do still have your different role within the house. And your feature was house connections. As an agent of your house, you can always get lodging and food for your friends at a house enclave. When the house assigns you a mission, it usually provides you with necessary supplies and transportation. Beyond this, you have many old friends, mentors, and rivals in your house, and may encounter one of them when you interact with a house business. As a Larendar agent, you may know the captain of an airship. As a Galanda agent, you may know a lot of innkeepers and bartenders. The degree to which the acquaintances will be willing to help you out will depend on your current situation in your house, current standing in your house. So that looks to be basically the same, and then you've got your bonds, ideals, traits, and flaws. So anyway, guys, I hope that's okay. That was actually a lot longer than I had anticipated, going through each individual Dragonmark. We touched on all the Dragonmarks, the previous races, and a couple of the feats. What do you think? I really like the concept of these marks, spells of the mark ability, where you choose a Dragonmark and it's just going to expand your spell list by, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 extra spells. There's a lot of really clever and creative ways you could blend an existing class with the different spells of the mark by expanding the spell list. Like I said, if it's a class that prepares their spells or has ritual casting and the spells of the mark you have are ritual castable or are ones you don't normally have on your spell list, this could go a long way for expanding that list, giving you some interesting, unique options for perhaps survivability, perhaps social encounters, or just sometimes, straight up movement abilities or, deception kind of abilities. And I think it's really good. So you're going to get that D4 to basically 2 rolls, whatever your stat rolls are, 1 or 2 spells for free, once per long or short rest in some instances, and then an additional 9 spells. That the only downside is spells of the mark are useless if you're not a spellcasting class, because they only expand people that have spell casting already. It does work for warlocks, but they are not automatic spells known or always prepared. They're just now options for you on the spell list. So something to just keep in mind when you're going through that. I do really like these a lot. I was bummed to see the two elf sub-variants go away, but at least they kept Revenant Blade, although it did get a little bit of a nerf. And then it was interesting to see they removed Greater Dragonmark as a feat, but it makes sense because that kind of the functionality of that was rolled into the spells of the mark, and I like the updates they made to the Aberrant Dragonmark feat as well. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about my coverage of these races and what you and these Dragonmark races. Do you like the old version? Do you like the new version? I feel like you probably gotta like the new version. It just seems like they're better overall and more refined. But I'm curious what you think, so leave me a note in the comments. If you like this video and want to see more Eberron related content, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more going forward. In the near future, I am going to be doing a giveaway here on the channel of different copies of the Collector's Edition and the regular edition of Eberron Rising from the Last War. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure you stay tuned here and to the social medias to see when that goes live. I also do stream on Twitch every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and every other Sunday. So hope to see you there. Here's a link in the description if you want to check that out as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.